Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, where men go from good to great in their life and love. Now more than ever, our world needs strong, courageous, and compassionate men, because we believe that when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Now, this movement is called Dad Nation, but ultimately this is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come, because we believe that every wife and child deserves a father who is pursuing greatness. Now, I'm your host, Mitchell Osmond, and I'm so grateful and I'm genuinely humbled that you've chosen to spend your most precious resource, which is your time, with me today. I don't take that for granted. So it's my intention to bring you great content every single weekend that you can it's not just information, but implementation. It's information that you can implement and apply today to see changes in the areas of your life that you want to see change. Okay. So today I'm particularly excited about this episode because we're going to be talking to a friend of mine. His name is Jeremy Goertz. And so Jeremy is a husband, a father, a homesteader, an entrepreneur, and a YouTuber with a channel called A Simple Little Life. Now, this YouTube channel has almost 300,000 subscribers. And Jeremy creates videos documenting all of his projects. He's specifically very, very talented at making knives. That's also what he does. And he does a bunch of other things like tool reviews and all that stuff. And it's a fantastic YouTube channel. If you're a guy and you love like woodworking or any kind of projects, working with your hands, knives, reviews, all that kind of stuff, check out his channel. I'm going to put his link in the show notes below. But the reason why I'm particularly looking forward to talking with this guy is because he's going to be the first guy on this episode that is actually from my personal life that I know that I see on a weekly basis. So this is going to be it's pretty special for me as well. So a little bit about Jeremy's personal life. He is married, has been married for this month is going to be his 23rd anniversary. So shout out to you, man. That's incredible. They have 4 wonderful children from the range of 12 to 19. So his house is full of teens. We're going to talk about that. And he's homeschooled his kids from pretty much from the beginning. He's been an entrepreneur, had a lot of different jobs since before he was an entrepreneur. Like he was a millwright, project manager, full-time photographer. Of course, now he's a knife builder and has this YouTube channel. Interesting fact about him, he's also a master mason. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. It's pretty cool. So today's episode is going to be interesting because Jeremy in many ways has blazed a different trail. He's certainly carved his own path for him and his family. So for example, like I said, he's escaped the 9-to-5. He's done the entrepreneur life, the homesteading, YouTubing, homeschooled his kids. Him and his wife and his family serve at the church that I attend. This is kind of where I met them. And they just go all in with everything. And so that's why the episode is called Dadding Different, right? The value of blazing your own trail, of carving your own path as a father. So if you like to do things differently, if you've been considering homeschooling your kids, if you've been wondering about how to grow a YouTube channel, if you are wondering about all these different things, this episode is going to be fantastic for you. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into this conversation with Jeremy. I hope you enjoy it. We'll catch up right after. Well, welcome, Jeremy, to the Dad Nation podcast. Just so excited to have you on the show today. And I told the listeners just a little bit before this conversation, a bit of your intro, a little bit about what you're up to. But I just want to say, man, I think this is the first time I've actually had somebody on the show that's like in my personal like realm and someone that I see on a weekly basis at least. So it's cool, man. It's a bit of a special thing to have you on the show. And so thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. And so I'd love to start off just the conversation, just to let everybody know, because I know probably a lot of people listening may not know who you are. And we're going to talk about your story because I think it's just so cool how you've done life different and you've carved your own path, which we're going to get into. But just to start us off, would you mind telling us a little bit more about who you are, your kids, your family, all that kind of, maybe a little bit about your YouTube channel?
Okay. Yeah, no. So, my name is Jeremy Goertz and 44 years old. Grew up in Calgary, Alberta, and kind of had just a normal, typical life, church family and stuff like that. And met my wife in youth group, actually, and then got married quite young. She was 18 and I was 21. And we're actually coming up on our 23rd anniversary, and it's been fantastic. And we have four wonderful children. So, uh, like 19, 17. So we got like three teenagers in the house, and it's busy, man. It is busy. The hardest thing in my life right now is keeping track of vehicles.
No
Who's
doubt.
driving what where? Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. I've done a lot of different things for work. Um, Started out as like a millwright, which is a heavy duty mechanic essentially, and really enjoyed that. And I've done that for most of my life, and then other things here and there. And then kind of the way things have turned for the last 7 years, I've been making knives full time, and then doing YouTube videos about that.
Hmm. Well, tell us a little bit about the YouTube stuff, man. So, why did you start Simple Little Life on YouTube?
Okay. I had my first YouTube channel before Google owned YouTube. I've always made videos. I love the process of filming and editing. I know a lot of folks that do YouTube, they talk about editing is the worst thing on earth, and that's the part I enjoy the most. I used to do videos for the company I worked for as a project manager, and I would take photos from all the jobs we've done through the years and compile them into a Christmas video, and they kind of liked those. And then we kind of started adding some silly things to it. Like we had a dummy that drove around on the forklift, like this coverall stuff with newspaper. And I just really enjoyed the videos. And then when YouTube came out, I was like, this is interesting. Anybody can put anything up and people can watch it. And so I started a YouTube channel and I would just random things. Um, and that kind of died off for a bit. Like I'd be riding my bike to work. I used to do a 26-mile each way commute. I did it 3 days a week, but there'd be a crop duster and he'd be flying over the fields, and I'd just pull over my little flip camera. I don't know if anybody remembers what those were, but I'd film it and I'd put it to music, and I was like, hey, this is cool. And this the most ridiculous stuff, like a lot of YouTube was back then. And I left that alone for a while. And then I wanted to kind of start homesteading and being independent, and that's where the name came from, Simple Little Life. I started a channel. I had a couple videos, like I built a quad for my, a trailer for behind my quad, and I was working for a company at the time and called Sangel, and at the time they were the largest privately owned oil company in Canada, and I ended up getting laid off right before they went under. And so I said, you know what? That's it. I'm going to jump into this. I'm going to start YouTubing, homesteading. Um, we had previously, about 4 months before I got laid off, we'd bought 13 acres of land just outside of Strathmore. And the goal was to try and maybe in about 5 to 10 years, eventually build there. I just wanted to secure the land, right? Because we'd been searching for like 10 years. So we bought this land. 4 months later, I got laid off, and I was thrilled because it was a drudgery working there. When I started, it was 180 people. And when I made it through 6 rounds of layoffs, and when I got laid off, there's 18 of us left. And so it was dark and gloomy. And so when I got laid off, I called Steph. I was like, honey, I've got some amazing news. And she's like, well, I was like, I got laid off. And she's like, no. And I was stoked. She was concerned. And instantly I had a plan. I was like, you know what? We're going to sell our house that we have in Strathmore, which is just outside of Calgary. And I'm going to build our own house on our property. I said, this dream's just coming faster. We ended up having a lot of delays with permitting and stuff like that. And so in the interim, I started setting up this homestead. We had probably the greatest chicken coop ever built before we had a house. Like this thing was the Fort Knox for chickens, like nothing would get in there. We had animals, we had a well, and I was setting up like a homestead, and we ended up selling our house quicker than we thought. We bought a fifth wheel trailer and lived in that while we were building our house. And that's when I really started going down to YouTube. And again, the initial concept was like homesteading. And I think I had 7 guys from work that subscribed because I just wanted to keep in touch. And you'd get like 3 views on a video and a couple views on the. You just kept doing it and doing it. And then I was really into knives. Like I've always been a knife collector. While I was working at Sanjo, I'd built some equipment and had been making knives as a hobby. And I thought, you know what? I should make a video about making a knife. And this was right when Forged in Fire first came out. A lot of people have probably heard of that show. And so I made this knife, put out this video, and it got way more views. Like within a couple of days, it had a few hundred views. And I'm like, oh, there's something here. And so I kind of went down that rabbit hole on YouTube. So the namesake doesn't align very well with the content, but it is what it is. So that's kind of why I started it, just for fun, mostly. Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah, I love that story. You kind of, I mean, there was some intentionality, but you also kind of fell into it. You know, you posted a video about a knife, and it just kind of started to take off,
Yeah.
and I love that.
Yeah.
Um, that's interesting. Well, one thing that honestly that I just think is so fascinating about you, Jeremy, and how you live is that a lot of the decisions you've made maybe aren't really conventional. You know, the idea to sell your house to live in a fifth wheel trailer. How many kids did you have at that point?
4 kids. Uh, I'll tell you the truth of it. We ended up living there for 2.5 years
Wow.
while
Wow.
homeschooling. I think the only thing that made that bearable is that my boys were really interested in hockey. So I had 3 boys in hockey. I coached 2 of their teams. And then my daughter was really into ballet. She was dancing with the Alberta Ballet in Calgary. So it was basically a place to sleep, like an RV should be. It was a crazy busy time, but I'd be here, 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 here. And yeah, that's kind of two and a
That's
half years.
incredible.
Yeah. When we
Two and
got our, sorry, I was just gonna say, when we got our house done, our in-laws and stuff, their family, they're like, so where are you guys going to keep your RV? And I'm like, absolutely not. The first thing I did was I sold it, and now we tent camp. And people are like, are you guys going to get an RV? I said, never. No. I spent 2.5 years in one. I'm good, thanks.
wow, 2.5 years, 4 kids, growing a YouTube channel, homesteading, yeah, kids in sports, ballet. Wow, dude, that's admirable. That's incredible.
Or just crazy.
That's cool, man. So okay, we're going to talk about, because you said you homeschooled as well. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you guys serve, because we go to the same church, and I see how your family, all of you are just all in. And that's another way that you guys aren't really conventional in the sense that the way most families, the rhythms that they have, we'll get to that. But we talked a little bit about your YouTube channel, A Simple Little Life. And so I want to park there for a moment, because how many subscribers do you have on your account at this point?
I just say it's 299,000.
Okay, so almost 300K.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone loves, that success story kind of thing, and I would say, man, this you've been a success in many ways. And so, if there are men listening to the episode today that have thought about starting a YouTube channel, maybe have thought about escaping, the 9 to 5 and starting something like this. As a man who clearly has overcome adversity and faced challenge after challenge, what's just some simple practical advice that has really stood the test of time for you, in your journey of growing this YouTube channel and kind of escaping the 9 to 5 kind of thing? What is some timeless tips that you would maybe give some guys who are listening?
Oh, I'd say the first one is passion. You really have to want it because it is more work than conventional, a
Mhm.
conventional life. That's the thing that really drives, like, you start a YouTube channel and you make one video and it's, this is kind of neat. And you do a second one. And the early stages, like I'd mentioned, you don't get any subscribers, you don't get any views. And I still wanted to do it. I was like, I'm making these videos for myself because I enjoy doing this. And I think that's the biggest thing. It is not easy. A lot of people think, "Oh, I'm gonna start a YouTube channel. It's gonna be great." And I've talked to so many people like, "Why don't I? Why am I not at 50,000 yet? I've got like 40 videos." I'm like, "You might need more, more like 400 to get to 50,000." So I would say passion, and I think that passion will carry you through because it is
Mhm.
a lot of work. If you're not really into something, as soon as it's kind of like maybe you're not seeing the results you've wanted, it's easy to be like, you know what, this is a waste of my time. I'm out. But it's just that passion. It's got to be something you want. You gotta
Mhm.
want it bad, I would say.
Mhm. And you probably, like, I think what you're saying is you really got to love the process,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely, yeah,
Rather than just constantly, salivating over that end result, that YouTube paycheck, whatever.
yeah,
Just falling in love with the process of filming, creating content, editing, posting, because
yeah,
it's a long game, is what you're saying, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's cool,
And
man.
then
Why? Go ahead.
I would say the one other thing is you really have to believe in your message. Like if you're presenting something and you're not fully convinced that, well, with my homesteading stuff, I kept doing that because I was so interested in it. And I thought, you know what, somebody's going to want to see this. And to guys out there that feel like they have something they want to get out, you if you think that's valuable, it's worth getting it out there. You know, people will
Mm,
benefit. And I think we all have interesting stories. I tell a lot of folks, like I teach Sunday school, and I tell a lot of the kids, I'm like, you know what? Every single one of us in this room is better at something than everybody else.
mm.
And you've got a unique gift. And if you want to get that out there in the world via podcast or YouTube, absolutely. You know, I think it's important to believe in your message and be like, you know what, I think this is worth people hearing. And that will also kind of help take you down that road.
Mm. That's good advice. I think, the worst salesmen are people who don't believe in the product,
Yeah,
right?
that's
You
true.
can't
Yeah.
you can't fake authenticity. You can't fake enthusiasm. And so I agree, man. You have to connect with it on a deep visceral level. That's been my experience, and you
Mhm.
have to have something that you genuinely believe that you're making an impact, that this is something that connects deeper to your why. I heard a phrase a little while ago that your why power is stronger than your willpower, and
Mhm.
then sense that you have to connect with a deeper sense of your why, something that propels you, because you're going to run out of willpower when you get tired, and it has
Yeah.
to connect to something deeper. I mean, I resonate so much with what you're saying, man. I mean, I started a YouTube channel, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago. So, and you post a video and it's like, you think it's going to just go so well. And then you're like, what? Like, my YouTube channel is dismal at best at this point, but it's brand new. Right. So I'm learning these lessons real time right now. So thanks for sharing that, man. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Um, Hey, real quick, we're going to get back to the episode, but I want to give you a free gift today. So if you're here and you're listening to this and you have been having a hard time in your marriage, maybe you and your wife just feel like really great roommates. You haven't had fun in a long time. You're just kind of getting caught up in chores and the to-do list and dropping the kids off and picking them up. I've got something called the Roommate Remedy, which is a free PDF. It's a guide for you. It's 113 ways to have fun with your wife and spark intimacy again. And this guide is going to teach you and your wife, and going to give you a ton of different ways to have fun. So that's totally free for you. Listen, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to have the link in the comment section below. But if you're listening on audio, just hit up dadnationco.com/remedy for this free guide for you. Listen, I believe in the marriage model. I believe in you and your wife. You can do this. I'm rooting for you. All right, let's get back to the episode. So, well, that's great. That's a great tip. While we're here, something that I've been talking with men about recently is just because I talk to men about, they're just like, a lot of men are lacking passion in their life. They're kind of stuck in a dead end job. They come home and they just like, well, I just lay on the couch and mindlessly binge TV until they go to sleep. And there's just this boring drudgery through Monday to Friday, live for the weekends. Um, and a couple questions that I've heard over my life and compiled to help men really get a better understanding as to what they're passionate about. And I made an Instagram post about this. I haven't actually posted it yet. It's a little reel, but there's 3 questions. One is, I heard this, like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. If you were going to write a book about anything, what would the subject be? What would the title of the book be? Even if you're not a writer, what's something that will compel you so much that you would want to write a book about it? And that question is interesting because it really forces you to think about the things that you could talk about and write about endlessly, right?
Mhm.
The second question is, if you had a free Saturday, the wife was gone, the kids were out, you had just 6 hours to do whatever you wanted, what would that activity be? What would light you up and you get excited about spending that Saturday afternoon doing? And the third question, it was accredited to Seth Godin, and this is one of my favorite questions of all time. It's commonly asked these days, but the question is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? So And that the reason why I love this question is because it strips back our fears. Because a lot of us, especially men, we don't want to jump into something if we think that we might fail. We don't want to jump into it if we think that we're going to look like a failure, or people will judge us, or, well, what if I do this thing and everybody thinks I'm an idiot, or, whatever the situation is. And so this question is like, well, what if I had 100% guarantee that I would be successful in it? What would I do? You know, and I love that question because it allows us to kind of get past some of those subconscious filters we put on our decisions.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's pretty good. So hopefully, if you're listening to this episode, my friend, I hope that those three questions help you if you're stuck in a job that maybe you don't like, or you're feeling like you're lacking purpose. Okay, so talked a little bit about YouTube. Thank you for those tips. Now, there's two other things I want to ask you about. That's something that you do unconventionally. That's homeschooling, and then so your family serves so much in the local church, and in a lot of different, I mean, sports and different things as well. But when it comes to homeschooling, I mean, this conversation Sam and I have been having, and we're seeing large people of influence in the world now homeschooling. Like at one point, it was kind of like funky people just do, like,
Bunch of
it's
weirdos.
extreme conservatives, stuff like that, right? But now it seems like tons and tons of people are doing it, and there's growing resources and tons of different things. So so you got four kids, and how old is your oldest?
19.
19. How young is your youngest?
12.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow. You got four kids between 12 and 19.
Yeah.
Bro, you're in the thick of it, man.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about why you decided to homeschool your kids in the first place.
Okay. I was actually homeschooled, and so was my wife. Um, and like back in the day, like you say, I mean, homeschoolers are weird. And there's always that notion that, man, it's true by and large, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. When my wife and I got married, we wanted a family, we wanted kids, and we never really talked about education. And I just assumed that we were going to homeschool. And my wife was like, no, I think I'd like them to go to school. And we had a really nice, a private Christian school in Strathmore. And so we started off with our youngest, went to, I think he started kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3, and it was going great. My wife volunteered at the school a lot. Like they need parent volunteers to come in and like read and stuff like this. So she was at the school quite a bit. But my second son, Isaiah, he did not do well with school, to the point where every single day he was screaming, "Mommy, don't let them take me away." And it was breaking her heart every single day. And there's also when you have toddlers and you're home with the young ones, and all of a sudden they're in school, she felt longing, like she was missing them. And I would say that was the number one reason we chose. My wife just said, "You know what? I miss the kids too much." And so we decided to homeschool. And there's different ways of homeschooling. I've had cousins who they called it homeschooling and they basically just didn't do anything like through high school. Like they just lounge around in their pajamas all day long. Um, we've done a kind of a mix. The thing I really like about homeschooling is you have complete control over what your children are learning. As time goes on, I get more nervous about what the public school system is indoctrinating our children with. And I'm not against that at all. I'm not against public school. I don't think homeschooling's for everybody. I don't even think it's for every child. We have friends who have three of their kids homeschooling and their oldest goes to public school. And I think that's fine, right? Like the you also have to think of the needs of the children and how they learn.
Mm,
One of the other benefits I love about homeschooling is that you can tailor the education to strengths and weaknesses in your child. Our youngest is dyslexic, and so he couldn't read anywhere near where he's supposed to be. And instead of that being like a real issue for him in a classroom where his peers are 2 or 3 grades above him, we can deal with that at his own pace. And there's different things you can do with kids with dyslexia. And the one thing we decided to do is every night we would read the Proverbs as a family. We just pick the day of the week or day of the month, and that's the proverb we'd read. And we just go around in a circle, one verse at a time. And that really helped him just doing that over and over and over again. We all have the same version, right? And so he sees the word, he hears us saying it, and just that visual of him every single night seeing words, hearing what they sound like, within about 3 months, he was back to where he should be with reading. I was just, and sometimes I wonder if we had him in conventional school, if we would have just never known. It's like, man, he's just, I had troubles learning in school. I was always like a D student, did terribly, and I don't necessarily know why, but I know that I just barely struggled to get by, and nobody ever said, "Hey, let's take a look at this. Let's see what's going on here." That was when I was in school until grade 5, but so I think that's one of the other benefits, right? Your kids' different learning styles, learning strengths. Isaiah's really good at math, and he wrote his math diplomas when he was in grade 10. And so it's kind of like, oh, if a kid's excelling at this, just let's get it done, and
Mm.
you're not constrained to other people's schedules. I think they try their best in the public education or private education to come up with something that works fairly well for everybody. And that's what it is. It is what it is, right? I'm not complaining about that, but I think one of the advantages to homeschooling is that you're not confined to that. If you've got kids that excel in a certain area, you can focus on that. So there's quite a few advantages, and the big one too is that I kind of touched on it a little bit. Is like, what are they teaching your children? I remember it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. The provincial government was trying to push through legislation that would make it wrong that parents were not allowed to ask their children what they learned at school, and that they were trying to push that through, and that was like, whoa. you know I'm very conservative. I think the job of education is like, okay, let's get mathematics, reading, writing, sciences, stuff like that. Ideologies, that needs to come from the parents. And even so, the way we've done it is like up to high school, we kind of do semi-aligned, they call it. And so we do a lot of Bible studies and Bible curriculum. And then once they get into high school, I mean, I'd like my children to have a diploma, and then we go fully aligned. So essentially, they're doing the Alberta school curriculum, and we're through a Catholic school board, and they basically log into their computers every morning. They've got their teacher, and it's just like school on Zoom. And even in such, like even within a Catholic school system, it's still not perfect, right? They have one of their teachers very, very liberal minded, and he told my oldest son, I think it's 3 years ago, he said, "Mark my words, in 2 years, California is going to be under a foot of water because your parents work in the oil and gas industry." And it's just like, you know what? It's your job to teach different environmental viewpoints. Like, this is one outlook, this is another outlook. Even with things like social and different types of economies and different types of government, socialism, free capital market, and it's like, teach the kids those concepts. Let them understand the framework. What they choose to go with or what they think is the best, that's on them and their parents to figure it out.
Mm.
And so that's kind of the nice thing with homeschooling your kids, is that you get to indoctrinate them yourself.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's huge, man. Knowledge is power, right? And it's massive. We gotta know what our kids are learning.
Hmm.
And wow, yeah, that's a red flag. That thing you mentioned about the legislation they were trying to pass. It's wild, man.
Yeah. That was the same time they were also trying to ban homeschooling, essentially. And
Mm,
I think the reason that didn't go through is because they didn't target just homeschooling. They targeted
mhm,
anything outside of the public system. So all private schools, the Catholic school board, homeschoolers, and there's a large enough body to push back and say, no, no, not today.
mhm.
But yeah,
Wow.
and I like I say too, I think it depends on the child. Some kids will thrive with homeschooling, some kids won't. And it is important to socialize your children, because I think that's probably the number one thing I hear about, you homeschool, are your kids nerds? And there's lots of other ways to do that. At the same time, like, I had a hard time in school. We had issues with our oldest too, being bullied, especially in the young grades,
Mm,
because the way I see it is that when they're little, they don't know who they are yet. And if somebody challenges that, like, they don't have their identity. And so it's hard to defend something that you don't know. You
mm,
know, some kid says, "Oh, you're dumb." And the kid's like, "Oh, maybe I am dumb." Right? Or
mm,
as an adult, or even up to a teenager, once you're a teenager, people can call you names all you want. It's like,
mm.
no, I know who I am, right?
Yeah.
And I found that, like, like I had a lot of troubles in school. And when I look back, I was like, I didn't know who I was. And they were calling me mean names. And I was like, maybe they're right, you know?
Mm,
Um, but there's pros and cons to it for sure.
mm-hmm.
But it is interesting that it is becoming more mainstream, way more options for curriculum and stuff. When we started, have you heard of ATI?
No.
Bill Gothard? Very, very. Have you heard of the Duggars? They had a
No.
TV show called 19 and Counting or something. They had like 19 kids.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Turns out they had some serious issues. Like the dad's in big trouble. But we would go to
Wow.
these homeschool conventions in Knoxville, Tennessee every year. And the Duggars, they had a television show, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years. They're pretty famous. And I used to
Mm.
play basketball with them. And it was the only Bible based homeschool curriculum available at the time. And so that's kind of why we did it. But it's there's so many options now. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I hear. I mean, and maybe it's just because of my, the my vision shifting now, being a parent, right? So
Hmm.
how that works, but yeah, that's I hear tons of conversation around it and about a lot of my friends who are putting their kids in homeschooling and or have different small groups, like cohort groups, where they just cluster together and have their kids in a group and homeschool them together. There's lots of things going on. So okay, what couple just before we move on, what tips might you give? Like, you've been doing this for many years now, and you did it a few different times, and so what advice would you give any parents who maybe have kids 3, 4, 5, and they're thinking about this, and think about putting their kids in homeschooling? What advice would you give them? Maybe some things they need to watch out for, maybe some things that need to consider before doing this, or things that maybe are not in the obvious surface when considering this situation. What
Hmm.
tips would you give them?
I think I hear a lot of people say that they're not qualified for it. They're
Mm,
like, oh, I'm not a teacher. I haven't been to university. And that's not a prerequisite to educating your children properly. And a lot of people say too, I don't know if I have the patience for it. And I was actually talking with my wife about this specifically because she's obviously far more involved with it than I am. And she said that was her number one reason why we didn't initially start. She says, I don't know if I could handle it. And she told me every day I would wake up and the first thing is like, dear God, please give me patience for my children today. And if you're feeling compelled or if you're feeling like maybe you're called to homeschooling, I think it's something you should definitely look into. God will never give us a challenge or lead us down a path we can't handle. No, that might not be easy, but if you truly feel like this this might be the right thing for my family, it's worth trying.
mm,
You can always send them back to school.
yeah.
It's not like it's a commitment. I know lots of people that start out homeschooling for the first couple of years, and they're like, you know what, this is different than we thought it would be. It's just not working out quite the same, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Mm,
And
yeah.
there are a few other things to think about. Like I really like the advantage of knowing what they're learning, controlling what they're learning. But then there's also just very practical benefits that you're not tied to a schedule.
Mm,
When the kids were younger, we did a lot of skiing. And so we'd buy seasons pass to Nakiska or wherever. But instead of me having to be like, okay, Saturday, let's go skiing when the hill's busy. And then with myself and my wife being self employed, we went every single Tuesday and we can just shift our schedule around. You want to take vacation, the kids can work ahead. You can even bring school with you if you're traveling. So there's also the very practical side of it as well.
mm. Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, what a cool. I mean, I never actually never even considered that, the
Oh,
flexibility. I mean,
it's
brilliant.
good. Yeah.
Hmm.
There are a lot of other programs as well. Like when I was in homeschool, they had a thing called Friday School. And so it's through like different homeschooling. Like there's a Calgary Home Educators Association, it's called or something. These things are everywhere, but you can get together and it'll be like, okay, we're having gym day. Well, on Fridays we'd have like gym for like 2 hours, and then we'd have a band, so you could actually play instruments in a band. Then there was like public speaking and things that the parents can't necessarily offer. just to
Mm-hmm.
kind of round out some of the extracurriculars that make up the public education system. We had like home economics that we did on Fridays, and so there's a lot of options. And like you said, it is getting far more popular,
Mm-hmm.
and it's easier now than ever to do. And I think if people saw how easy it is, like it's fantastic. I would say I'm not like an advocate for homeschooling, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
very glad that we did. I think it's everybody has to make that decision. But if you're interested at all, I think it's absolutely worth looking into, and maybe talk to people that you might know, see what
Mm-hmm.
their thoughts are. And each homeschool family probably takes different things away as benefits, and they do
Mm-hmm.
it differently too, right? And you can kind of tailor it to what works for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's great, man. Yeah, this is awesome. Great information, brother. So I know there's going to be a lot of men listening, new dads or dads with kids and thinking about putting them in school, homeschool, and making these decisions. So thank you for the different considerations to be taken into mind when you're making these decisions. It's really, really helpful, man. So hey, we're going to get back to the episode, but while I have you here, I wanted to ask you, would you consider helping a brother who's struggling in his life right now? Maybe it's a guy searching the internet to help save his marriage, his health, or his family. Maybe it's a man that's just behind you on this journey. And we know, statistically speaking, there are thousands of men doing this, and we know that there are probably men in your social circles that are struggling with some of these very same things. If you'd be willing to help, this is how you can help, and I promise it'll take less than 60 seconds. If you've gotten any value from this podcast so far, would you be willing to give us an honest review and subscribe to our channel, whatever channel you're listening on? If you want to take this to the next level, would you consider sending this link to a friend of yours who you know would benefit from listening to this show? Now, why would you do that? Because the more men that hear this content, the more marriages we can save, the more fathers we can help step up, and the more lives that we can change forever. This isn't just for the men. This is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come. So I want to say thank you so much for doing your part to help other men find the support that they need. Now let's get back to it. We'll talk a little bit about, your family's involvement. I mean, obviously by now people are knowing you're a person of faith, right? And this is, of course, as am I. This is what connected us. But why? Like, I know that you and your whole family serves, at your church, and I see you guys every weekend doing that. All in. This is another way that, like I said, many families just kind of whatever they call it, fair weather Christians or fair weather churchgoers, like they go to church when it's sunny, rainy days they don't go,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But you guys are all in, and so tell us a little bit about the decision, because you don't just do that by accident. It requires intentionality, it requires commitment, it requires this, like, we will do this as a family and commit to it. So tell us a little bit about what you do in the church, like how you guys serve, and more specifically why you've decided to do this and why you continue to do this with your kids.
Yeah. So we serve on Sunday mornings. Most of us, like our teenagers, they serve during the week as well, with different like crossover sports camps and stuff like that. Sundays look like 9 a.m. and 11. We have two services, and we help out in children's ministries. So my wife and my daughter, they take groups, small groups, in grade 1, 2, and then I help out in grade 3, 4. And I take small groups. I'm the 9 a.m. coach for all the other leaders, and then I do large groups. So I gotta do the stories and stuff like that. It's interesting how it happened. You know, I think every single Christian parent's number one desire is that their kids remain in the church into adulthood and as they continue their life. And I think if church to you is just a pew that you sit in on a Sunday, it's easy to be like, yeah, you're not tied to it. Whereas if you get involved and serve, it is like an incredible community, and you're needed. You make a
Mhm.
difference. My wife and I, like at our other church, the church that we met at, I taught Sunday school, grade 5, 6 boys. We took a break when our kids were little. Sometimes, it's just a different season, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then when we started attending Center Street Church was actually the week before the pandemic, and then it was all shut down. And then when things started to reopen, some of my daughter's friends were helping out with some of the children's stuff. And they said, "Hey, can I help out too?" And like, sure. And then Isaiah did it. And then I think the next week Steph did it. And I thought, okay, and what do you guys think of it? How is it? And they're like, oh, it's fun. And we were just going to do casual, like every other week or something like that. And I said, okay, fine, I'll help out too. And so when I had our interview with our children's pastor, she said, "What do you feel like doing?" And I said, I'll take a small group, whatever." And she goes, "Okay." And I also checked the little box that said large group. And she goes, "Do you know what that is?" I'm like, "No, I don't know what that is." She goes, "You're going to stand in front of them and introduce the story for the week, the Bible story, whatever." So, oh yeah, I'll do that. And I'd never done that before. And I thought, let's just give it a shot. And I absolutely love it. Like
Mm,
Sunday mornings are the highlights of our week.
mm,
It's exhausting, like, it takes a lot of energy, but we drive home from church Sunday morning, and it's just, "Oh, this person did this, and and this happened," and it's amazing the community that we have found in serving.
mm,
Like, so many friends, like, Center Street Church is a large church, but we know so many people there, more people than I know when my wife and I got married, we attended a church of 300, and I know more people at Center Street and better because we're serving more.
mhm,
And I think the important thing with serving is find where you're called to serve.
mm,
You know, I first did the list where you can volunteer to serve, and I put a few things. I put building maintenance because I enjoy that. I like fixing stuff. I put photography because I like taking photos, and then I also put children's ministries because I really like hanging out with kids. Did not sign up for youth because like I've been asked, "Hey, will you come on a youth retreat?" I'm like, "No." Was like, I got teenagers. I need a break. So there's if I were to sign up for that, I think that's what a lot of people think serving is. It's a drudgery. It's like, ugh. But man, we're all gifted in different ways.
yeah,
What you're good at. If you think about what's something I would do just for fun, chances are there's a ministry that you can serve in that is in alignment with something like that. And it's incredible. Like yeah, just the sense of relationships and not even with the other people serving, but like with the kids that we're with. When our kids are at a youth event or a youth retreat, all of these kids, where's Isaiah? Where's Isaiah? And we have a lot of youth that serve in our church. It's amazing to see. And other youth see that and then they get involved. It's like this army when they have a youth retreat, we're down half the people. It's
yeah,
like we put calls out, say anybody who's free this weekend, please, we need your help. So it's really interesting, and like I say, I think the main benefit is that my kids belong in the church. They're needed in the church, and a church, it's a place where they strongly desire to go to.
mm,
We usually attend the 4:30 Saturday service,
mhm,
because I enjoy, I need to be fed as well. And for whatever reason, if we're doing something, we get carried away and we're not going to make it. The kids are like, seriously, like it's incredible. They're way more upset. Or it's like, we're just going to watch church tonight. They're like, oh man. And, and to have that problem from your teenage children, I'm like, this is incredible. This is incredible.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I think. I mean, I agree. Like I said, you and I are a person of faith, and I know there's going to be a lot of people listening to this show that maybe aren't. But I'd encourage you to consider, if you're listening, what that might look like for you. Faith can look like a lot of different things, and unfortunately, I think sometimes even the word church can be a bit of a trigger word for people because they've been
Hmm.
hurt in the past. Because the reality is every organization is filled with human beings. At least it will be that way until we're all robots.
Yeah.
But and as long as there are humans a part of it, there's going to be hurt feelings because we're flawed and we make mistakes. And so my encouragement would be to just dig in and get involved in some type of community, or ask that question of like what does faith look like for you? Because I think it's just so valuable on so many levels. I think even just when we think about ways of like generosity, giving of our time and our talent and our treasure, right? Like our money, and then our time that we do, and then the gifts that we've given. I think it's important to give back. It's important to invest in your communities around you, and invest in the next generation, which is exactly what you're doing, and helping young kids grow up with great, strong moral values. And and that's a great thing. I was talking with somebody a couple episodes ago, and I had said, whether you believe in God or the Bible, whether you believe in it or not, if someone were to just simply live by like biblical principles, by the way that Jesus lived, you'd live a pretty incredible
Mhm.
life, because it's just practical, and it's just a guide to be a great person.
Yeah.
Now there's
Yeah.
there's a whole other side to that as well, but honestly, I tell people that all the time. When people ask me, well, what if there's no God? You
Mhm.
know, what if at the end of the day, this is all just false and it's not true? And then you die and that's it. And I said, well, you know what? I will have lived a pretty epic life, and I've been a good and I will have been a person of integrity, of
Mhm.
honor, of, character. And I think that's a pretty great way to live,
Mhm.
so that's cool, man. Well, thank you. Did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I was just like, kind of along those lines. If somebody's not a person of faith, one thing that is often missed is that when you do something for someone else, you are the one that's blessed. Like the feeling. So, say you go and volunteer at a soup kitchen, right? I'm going to go sling soup on a Saturday afternoon. You will feel incredible. First of all, that you're helping people, they'll appreciate it, and it also give you perspective. Is like, man, I really don't have reasons to complain.
Mm,
I think it's so easy in today's day and age to live self-centered lives.
hmm
Um, Everything is about us, me, me, me. But if you look around and pay attention to your neighbors and be like, you know what, let me help this guy out a minute. It's something as simple as opening the door for someone. I feel so. You just open the door and they'll look at you and shrug and look, thank you so much. You just made their day, but you
hmm
feel good too. And I think
Yeah.
that's often missed is like you help people out, you're gonna feel good about it. And whether
hmm
they appreciate it or not, you're gonna be the one walking away feeling better off. So
hmm
mm,
It's been great, Jeremy. I just got one more question before we wrap up the episode. And I ask every guest this on every episode because I think that it really kind of strips back all the things that make us so busy in life and helps us to focus on really what's most important. And oftentimes it really reveals the heart of those who answer it. So I want you to picture with me for a moment that you had just passed away, and you kind of having this out of body experience where you are able to see your wife and your 4 kids, and I want you to picture basically the funeral has just finished, and people had left your house, kind of thing, and your wife and your kids are sitting around the kitchen table, and you're able to just be a fly on the wall, so to speak, and you can hear the things that they're saying. You can hear the conversations that they're having about dad. Um, and and they're talking about the man that you were, the father you were, the life that you lived. What are some of the things that you would want your children to say about who you were while you were here on earth?
mine will be very short. He was a good man who loved me.
Mm,
That's what I'd want them to know.
mm, good. That's good. I think I think a lot of kids don't always feel that way,
Hmm.
coming from broken homes or dysfunctional upbringings, have challenging relationships with their dads. And honestly, man, just something like that. My dad loved me. He was there. He showed up. That's saying a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
I appreciate that, man. Well, Jeremy, thank you for taking the time to chat today.
you bet.
It's been a blast. I know that a lot of these men who are going to be listening to this episode, there's a lot to take away. A lot of advice from a man who has been doing this parenting game, been doing this entrepreneur game, marriage game for years now. So thanks for sharing your wisdom and some of your life experience with us. I appreciate it so much, brother. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah.
Hope you have a great week, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing what you're doing here. This is fantastic. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation I had with Jeremy today. And we actually didn't ask that question to him. Where can we find him? And I just got so caught up in the conversation. But I reached out to him, and I will have put his links in the show notes below check out his YouTube channel, The Simple Little Life, and also him on Instagram for how to connect with him. I know you're going to love his content. And lastly, this next episode of the Dad Nation podcast is going to be asking the question, what is a Sabbath and why should I take one as a busy dad and a busy husband? Now, this is something that's maybe an old school term for some of you. Maybe you've heard the term sabbatical or different variations of it, and it's all going to be all about how to rest and how to rest well and what goes on when we rest from lots of different ways of our brain and our bodies and what happens in our family. Super valuable. And now this is a great segue because I'm actually going to be taking the next 3 weeks off of podcasting because my wife and I are going to be going to Portugal and we're going to be leaving this week. Okay, my brother-in-law is getting married, so we're going to spend some time over there. And so I'm going to be taking some time away to be completely present with my family while I'm there. But here's the deal. Before you go, if you haven't subscribed or followed the show on whatever streaming platform you listen to, I want you to do that before this episode is over because I want you to get notified when the next episode is released in August. You see, listen, me and you, we got a good thing going here. All right, so let's keep this up. And wherever you're listening from in the world, I know there's people all over North America. There's some people over in Europe that are going to be listening. And so wherever you're listening from today, I hope and I pray that you have an incredible few weeks while I'm away. And I'd love for you, I think it's a great idea for you to take some time to be present, to slow down time, and to fully soak in some precious moments and some precious time with your loved ones. Until we talk again in 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about rest and the Sabbath. Have an incredible 3 weeks, and we will catch up after I get back. Okay. Take care of you guys.